Rene Descartes counts as one of the godfathers of modernity, of the new age, of die Neuzeit, as we say in German. And he spawns Cartesianism, as Malebranche is the first one to refer to. But it seems that he was apparently, as A.C. Grayling argues, a Jesuit spy. Now, even if he wasn't, that can still, however, he was in the employ and he was educated by the Jesuits. So there is still, even though he may not have been a spy, there's a connection here, and I think that one is crucial. The Jesuit approach is ultimately quite a nihilistic and, we might say, modern one. God is dead and is good enough for the masses to believe in. But ultimately, what the intelligences have to work with and have to work on and have to ensure is the manipulation of consciousness. This, by the way, is what Baudrillard so vividly points out in Simulacra and Simulation. So this is the Jesuit approach. And if you think of this as, if you accept this as true, then Descartes' project makes a lot more sense. It is from the beginning an attempt to manipulate consciousness. And when you read the meditations, which are not meditations at all, there's no meditation that goes into it. It's a rather bizarre text when you take it very literally, which you should. He does away with the entire world. And not only, he does away with his own body. Now, of course, we could say that, as Hegel so wrongly and in such a misguided manner did, that this grounds philosophy again, finally, in consciousness. No, it doesn't, because this consciousness is ultimately purely logical and empty. It is not consciousness at all, to be frank. It is a consciousness that is malleable, that can be formed and informed because it is so empty. And that on top of it denies the very existence of the external world, which then can only be guaranteed by proposing the existence of God, the watchmaker, or the mechanic ultimately, who ensures the existence of the other world because God is not an evil demon, etc. You know the story. So, and let's not forget that he understood his text as sort of a phoenix rising out of the ashes of scholasticism. And so the picture, let's say, that emerges at the beginning of this strand of modernity, which is not the only trajectory of modernity at all, and shouldn't be the only one. We shouldn't absolutize Descartes, certainly highly influential. But what we see then is the attempt to manipulate consciousness in such a way that, to use Hegel here a bit against him, it does actually become solid ground or an island or something to stand on. However, one that is an artificial island to stand on. An island produced, a landmass placed somewhere that can ultimately be manipulated to be directed in terms of a framework that sees the world only in a specific way, and rarely or never lets the world as such, the phenomena themselves, come forth and speak. So whether or not Descartes was a Jesuit spy is for historians to decide, and is philosophically ultimately not entirely insignificant, but doesn't matter all that much. What does matter is that it is an attempt, and it's a very successful attempt, at the manipulation of consciousness. And it should perhaps teach us to a certain extent that some texts we read from the olden days are not as innocent as they might seem, being petrified now in the unmoving past, or so it seems. And that we have to, in some sense, be quite suspicious of certain texts, I would say, and read them against themselves. Read texts in a way to see them for what they are, which is the attempt to structure consciousness, perception, in such a way that certain ways of seeing or being are excluded. And at the same time, this opens up, of course, because we don't absolutize this way of reading. We don't absolutize Descartes as the only godfather of modernity. There's others, there might be Bacon and John Dee and others, of course, but that there's also always and necessarily other trajectories that are open to us as well to pursue. And that, I think, would be the right approach in this very given moment. I think we might be disguided if we continue, for example, like what Heidegger did in the beginning of his writing, to rightly choose Cartesianism as his nemesis and present Dasein as being, ultimately, Dasein is equivalent to being in the world, as not divided from the world, as not falling out of the world, as in a subject-object dichotomy in Heidegger's Dasein. But there might be a completely different approach also, which is to put this to one side as one possibility that's in some extent has played out, and then get to those other sources of another modernity that is also running, that is also unfolding, let's say, and hasn't run its course yet. Thank you.